Yeah, Wheaton tonight, because this is where that terrible mystery began 40 years ago. The little girl's vanishing from really just within about a quarter mile of where I now stand. And this is where the press conference was held today.
Welch did admit to playing a role in getting rid of at least one of their bodies. Investigators found evidence of that when they found a tooth on Taylor's Mountain.
Sheila Mary Lyon and Katherine were born to John and Mary Lyon in Kensington, Maryland, and were just 2 years apart. It was the beginning of spring break on the 25th of March, 1975, when 12-year-old Sheila and 10-year-old Katherine asked their mother if they could go out for a while and enjoy a day out since it was spring break. It was around the time where most children their age were going out to parks or malls on their own without parental supervision. They also lived in a safe community where serious crimes rarely ever happened. She agreed, and the girls headed over to the Wheaton Plaza shopping mall, about a half a mile from their home. Between 11 a.m. and noon, the girls left their home to go to the mall to see the Easter exhibits. Their mother had given them a curfew of 4 p.m. While at the mall, the girls decided to have lunch at a restaurant, a part of the mall called Orange Bowl, to have pizza. Around 4 p.m., Mary expected her daughters to be home as she had instructed them of that specific time. However, when 7 p.m. rolled around and there was no sight of the girls, she contacted the police. That day, Sheila and Katherine never returned home. Authorities started their investigation immediately and looked for clues leading to where the girls might be or what had happened. A few witnesses came forward stating that they had seen the girls around the mall. At 1 p.m., a neighborhood child admitted to seeing the girls together outside Orange Bowl, speaking to an unidentified man. At 2 p.m., the girls' older brother saw them at Orange Bowl eating pizza. A friend of the girls saw them walking along Drum Avenue, which was the most direct road leading back to their home, at about 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Investigators continued their search endlessly, looking for clues, but weren't able to find anything at all. The community also came together to search for the missing girls, but their search did nothing to bring investigators closer to finding the girls. The police had a few suspects via some of the witnesses. The neighborhood boy, who knew the girls and came forward with the information that the girls were speaking to an unidentified man, said that he was wearing a brown suit and carried a briefcase with a tape recorder. He was around 6 feet tall and looked as if he was between the age of 50 and 60 years old. Other children were around him, speaking into the microphone he was holding. This man was now a prime suspect in the Lyon sisters case, and 2 composite sketches of the man were created. According to press reports, a man who resembled the sketch had been spotted in nearby Prince George's County, Maryland, at the Inverson Mall and Marlow Heights Shopping Center a few weeks prior. These witnesses claimed that he had approached a number of young girls and requested their assistance in reading an answering machine message into a handheld microphone that was typed on an index card. Authorities thought that the Lyon sisters' disappearance may have been directly related. One young woman who was present at the mall the day the girls vanished claimed to have seen the Lyon sisters confronting a man who had been staring at them for far too long. She described him as having long hair, a scar on his cheek, a pock mark on his face, and that he was in his late teens to early 20s. The description was made into a sketch, but it wasn't made available to the public. In North Carolina, a 10-year-old girl was beaten, strangled to death, and molested in 1979. Fred Howard Coffey was found guilty of all 3 crimes and is currently serving a life sentence in prison. He was a suspect in the Lyon sisters case at the time. Authorities discovered that he had a job interview, which he was later hired, in Silver Spring, Maryland, 6 days after the Lyon sisters disappeared. Wheaton Plaza was not that far from Silver Spring. Coffey was never charged in connection with the disappearances, and investigators have been unable to establish whether he is related to the case. About a week after the Lyon sisters disappeared, an 18-year-old by the name of Lloyd Lee Welch told a security guard at the Wheaton Plaza that he had seen the girls entering a man's car and left in the car. Police didn't quite believe this information, figuring that he was only looking for attention. He even failed a lie detector test twice, and when pressed about it even more, he admitted that he had lied and just faded into the background. However, Police caught on to something in his lie that sounded like the truth. Lloyd had said that the tape recorder man had a limp, which many witnesses also said the same thing. In press reports, Raymond Rodolphe Molesky Sr. was mentioned as another potential suspect. In 1975, Molesky lived in Suitland, Maryland, not far from the malls in Prince George's County, where people had reported seeing a man approaching young girls with a microphone. In November 1977, Molesky killed his wife and his teenage son, and another son inside their home over a family dispute. He was convicted of the homicides and sentenced to 40 years in prison. He died in 2004. Not being able to charge these suspects, the case went cold until 2013 when there was a break in the case. In 2013, when detectives reopened the cold case, they focused on Lloyd Lee Welch, who had given the false statement to them back in 1975. While working on the case, detectives noticed that Welch had a resemblance to one of the composite sketches of the possible abductor back in the 70s, kind of like the sketch of the teen who was staring at the girls in the mall. They did more investigating on Welch and discovered that he was serving time in prison for molesting a 10-year-old girl. Police contacted him to talk, and he gave the story that he was outside of a liquor store a few miles from the Wheaton Plaza when he saw a man shove Katherine and Sheila into the back of a black Plymouth and had called the police from a booth. He said he had ID'd the perpetrator as Raymond Molesky, but the thing with Lloyd's story was that it was different from the first statement. In the old statement, made in 1975, he claimed that he was inside the mall when he saw the man with the tape recorder pushing the Lyon sisters into a red Camaro. This was very suspicious to authorities, and they questioned him for hours. They asked Welch this one question: "What do you think Raymond did to those girls?" And he answered saying that maybe he had raped them and killed them, or raped them and burned them. The mentioning of burning the girls was eerily specific to authorities, and they went ahead and gave Lloyd a polygraph test. When approaching Lloyd, authorities came up with a plan and told him that his polygraph test indicated that he had something to do with the girls' disappearance. When told this, Lloyd panicked and told police that he was actually familiar with Raymond Molesky and that the two of them used to get high in his basement together. There was a secret room that Raymond and Lloyd knew of, and according to Lloyd, one afternoon after the girls' disappearance, he stepped into the room and found Katherine and Sheila in the back room, tied up, drugged, and being assaulted by two strangers. Lloyd claimed that when he saw this, he ran out of the room and made up the story with the tape recorder man and the car. When authorities dug deeper into his story, they watched the story shift into many different versions and was unsure of what exactly was happening. Lloyd finally admitted that his reason for changing his story so many times was because he was afraid of someone, and that someone was his cousin Teddy Welch. He indicated that his cousin Teddy was the one with the plan to harm the Lyon sisters, but back in 1975, Teddy was just 11 years old, around the same age as the girls. Lloyd's introduction of his family led his two cousins to confess something. They had remembered in the spring of 1975, Lloyd and his girlfriend Helen were visiting their home. They visited with two large duffel bags that weighed about 60 pounds each and smelled like death. Not to mention, they had red stains that resembled blood. Lloyd claimed that the bags were filled with rotten meat that he had to get rid of and threw the bags onto a bonfire that lasted for days. Neighbors remembered how big the flames were and how terrible the smell was. This piece of information led police to their first piece of evidence. In this location, they found bone fragments and wire that probably came from Sheila's wired-rimmed eyeglasses and string that might have come from Katherine's beaded necklace she had worn the day she disappeared. Lloyd now changed his story once again, saying that his uncle had kidnapped the girls and kept them in his basement. But his uncle's basement looked nothing like what he had described when he claimed that the girls had been tied up, drugged, and assaulted. The basement didn't belong to his uncle, but it was the basement at his old house in Maryland. Ready with their equipment, they started investigating the area, and when entering the back room of the basement, the walls were glowing with blood, as if someone had been slaughtered there, but couldn't determine if the blood was Katherine's, Sheila's, or someone else's blood. Police went back to Lloyd with what they had found, and yet again he had another story to tell. He claimed that his father and uncle were holding Katherine and Sheila hostage in his basement, and Katherine tried to escape. Lloyd went on to say that he happened to be there at the time when his father broke Katherine's neck, and his uncle placed her body in one of the duffel bags. He then said that he didn't know what happened to Sheila exactly, but she was probably killed in Virginia at their family home. In 2017, detectives had enough evidence to put him on trial for the murders of the girls. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 48 years in prison. At that time, Helen and his father had already passed away, and his uncle denied everything, so no further details were ever uncovered about the girls. Though we may never know what exactly happened to the girls, at least we know enough that places Lloyd in the midst of what happened to the Lyon sisters.